Started and we're good to go. You can take it away.
Okay, thank you, Megan. Thank you. Welcome to our presentation, which is about empowering you with some strategies for embedding accessibility and inclusion in digital activism. I am Laura Perry, and my collaborator and co-presenter is Karen Caldwell. And we firmly believe that the strategies we share will be applicable in your workplace, current or future, so you can engage in activism related to accessibility and inclusion. We'd like you to chat in what your workplace is. Give us your occupation, and if you are a student or a future, and if you're a student, what your future occupation is. I was just looking. So we have about 16 participants, which is great. We're so glad to have you join us here today. As you're chatting in your occupation or what you hope to be, we're going to introduce you to Sarah. Sarah is a determined undergraduate student. She has dreams of excelling in her studies and pursuing a career in environmental science. She has eagerly embarked on her academic journey. However, Sarah harbors a hidden struggle, an invisible disability that threatens to derail her aspirations. Sarah suffers from a severe disorder of nausea, an invisible affliction that casts a shadow over her daily life. Each morning, she faces a wave of queasiness, a relentless companion that follows her wherever she goes. The disorder wreaks havoc on her class attendance, forcing her to miss lectures and seminars as she battles the debilitating sensations. Despite her best efforts, Sarah's condition makes it difficult to maintain focus during classes. Anxiety makes it challenging to absorb the course material and participate in discussions. The constant fear of embarrassment and judgment from her peers only intensifies her distress. Sarah's struggles extend beyond the classroom, casting doubts on her ability to secure employment. Traditional part-time jobs, which with their fixed schedules and demanding environments, seems out of reach for someone battling unpredictable bouts of nausea. Sarah's story has been inspired by the work we have done in this project, which we will tell you more about in the slides to follow. Sarah's story helps us uncover the potential range of challenges that people are wrestling with and the challenges they face in their day-to-day lives. So what we want you to do is consider this question. What are some barriers Sarah may encounter in her day-to-day life? And what we want you to do is go ahead and put it in the chat, put your response in the chat, and think about if you're a service provider, such as a librarian or a technologist, think about how your services may or may not be suited to serve someone with conditions like Sarah. If you are an instructor, think about how your course policies may impact Sarah's chances for success. Or perhaps you're a student or you're thinking of Sarah as a sister or a daughter or even a friend or yourself. Think about barriers and how those barriers, Sarah may experience those barriers. Put those ideas in the chat for us. And we'll come back to that in just a minute. As I continue on here, I want you to think about a framework that that is used called the disability matrix, and it helps us visualize the range of disabilities and the context with which people encounter disabilities and limitations associated with items that they are using in their environment. So if we look to an example, starting with the sense of touch, right? All the way over on the right-hand side, we have a permanent condition such as a missing limb. As we consider how our environment is designed to accommodate somebody with a permanent condition, such as a loss of a limb, we can then think about how that environment is also supporting somebody with a temporary condition, such as an injured arm. And we can look at the numbers. So we know that, somebody missing a limb that impacts about 26,000 people a year. We also know that having an injury to an arm might limit 13 million people in a year. But it also extends to situational conditions, such as someone, a young parent, a new parent having to hold a baby, right? And then having the limitation of only the use of one arm during that time period, which is around 8 million. So if we add that up, we consider the impacts increase tenfold over those considerations. We can then extend that even further to think about other conditions that people may be experiencing. So we have other, senses that are impacted by permanent disabilities, but then that extends to temporary or situational limitations as well. And that's when we can think back to our experience with Sarah. And Sarah and what she's experiencing in her day-to-day life, whether it's situational, temporary, or even a permanent condition, as what she has described. So those are some things that a framework that we think about in terms of a range of supports and accommodations for people with varying needs, right? So our project here, so Karen and I are collaborators on this applied research project, which was funded by Teach Access. And Teach Access is a nonprofit organization who works towards bridging the accessibility skills gap between education and industry. So I'm a graduate student in the Masters of Science in Instructional Design and Educational Technology program at SUNY Potsdam. I also work at Clarkson University as a director of academic technology and support. And Karen is an instructor in the MSIDET program. She's actually my instructor. As part of our project, I conducted a study last fall to hear directly from students like Sarah. And so what we asked in our study, first off, is we wanted to hear what were the barriers, consequences, supports, and opportunities that students with disabilities have. And our goal here was to have a better understanding, a deeper understanding of what those challenges are for students with disabilities, because that will help inform our choices and our decisions later on as we're designing environments, whether it be services or products, right? So as we went into this survey, I realized that I actually had some bias around what we would hear back in terms of results. I fully expected that we would hear from individuals telling us about mobility challenges. I thought we would hear likely people with vision, whether it's color blindness, low vision, blindness, or auditory. And this all comes from my background in digital learning in terms of aiming to make digital environments more accessible. Those are the challenges that we most commonly consider. But what we actually found was that was just the tip of the iceberg. So what we actually found and what we heard from the participants that engaged in our survey was that there's a whole lot more going on under the surface, right? And so what we heard from our students was a range of disabilities having to do with mental illness, ADHD, dysgraphia, eating disorders, chronic fatigue, depression, panic attacks, anxiety. These are the conditions that our students wrote in about and described barriers that they had associated with those disabilities. And the unique sort of consideration that we had with this has to do with the fact that mostly these are invisible disabilities, and that these are not immediately apparent, perhaps, to you and I as we're looking at somebody, but these are things that are going on under the surface, but they're very real and causing impacts to their experience as students, right? So our quantitative results from the survey told us some kind of predictable results, right? So we heard that 87% of students do experience barriers. as a result of their disability. And then we heard another 79% said that, yeah, we experienced consequences. What was most remarkable to us was what we received in the written comments, which were detailed descriptions of the situations that students find themselves in due to their disabilities. I'm going to share just a few with you here today because we think it helps describe the story and helps us relate even deeper to these individuals that are, challenged with these struggles. So in our first example, I have a hard time handwriting due to my condition dysgraphia. So when professors ban the use of laptops or digital devices in the classroom for note-taking, it makes the class infinitely more difficult. Another student wrote, having a panic attack in the middle of a class in which I needed to step out of the room, and it lasted 30 to 40 minutes and lost me a great deal of work time on my final class. And then I have a third example, which is I find myself unable to do things related to my phobias. For example, when it is dark, I do not leave my house alone because of a debilitating fear of falling. It has kept me from enjoying time with friends and even getting to work. And so what we found is that these comments and descriptions helped inform how we developed our strategies around next steps. So one of the things that it did was it allowed us to create personas. And personas are a tool often used in a variety of capacities, but what we wanted to do was utilize personas and add that element of the needs that people have. So personas are fictional characters you create based on your research or real life experiences. And creating personas helps us represent the different user types that might use your service, product, site, or brand in a similar way. Creating personas helps us understand their needs, experiences, behaviors, and goals. And Karen has embedded persona creation into her courses so that when students solve a problem or create an innovative solution, they have specific end users in mind. And as you can imagine, more than one persona would work best so that you have greater representation. Karen has her students create at least 2 early on in their process. So at this point, we'd like to pause and think about you and your workplace and think about the end user of your services or products. And if you're an instructor, you can think about your field of study and the end users of that discipline. So creating personas on your own and with a team is a powerful way to embed accessibility and inclusion into any workflow. And this is part of a process that Karen teaches. So another common framework called design thinking is a second strategy for you to consider. So personas are actually part of that first stage of design thinking, which is both a process and a habit of thinking that can be embedded in any environment to solve problems and seize opportunities or new approaches. The design thinking process helps us to solve problems and also to create or try out solutions. As you can see, it starts with empathy, which is what you experienced at the beginning of our session, and I hope through the data I shared with my research. Karen is now going to share another strategy called backward design. Karen uses backward design in the define, ideate, and prototype stages of design thinking. She used it in this project to revise her courses to embed accessibility and inclusion. So Karen, you want to take it away?
Absolutely. So backward design is another strategy we want to share with you for your toolkit, regardless of your background or your occupation. And it's really a strategy that we use for revising what we currently do, but it's also excellent for planning future events or activities or programs. And what I've been doing with my students is have them think about their workflow, whatever discipline they're moving into. And as you can see on the screen, backward design is a 3-step process to focus on the goals for any event or the program, as I said. And and it's not just about course design. So with backward design, you start at the end, and that involves identifying really and envisioning the desired result of whatever it is that you're planning. So in our case, we started with the learning outcomes of my course. And after that, we have to think in concrete terms. If that's the learning outcome, what does it look like? What evidence can I have my students create so that I can confirm that they have achieved those desired results? And again, in course design, those are assessments. And finally, we think about the activities that we can design that set our participants up for success, and give evidence of their achievement of those learning outcomes. So that's backward design. And of course, when we think about activities, we're looking at the learning activities or learning experiences that set students up for success. And now I'd like to demonstrate how I've done that with one of my courses, or actually for all of my courses. So Laura mentioned I teach in the instructional design program, but I also teach in the business program and in advanced studies and education. And I also am an online faculty fellow, so I do professional development with our faculty. So I have a wide range of students who are in my courses going off in different occupational directions. And throughout all of my courses, I have a learning outcome related to communication. So you see the before learning outcome, which is just, I want all of my students by the end of the course to be able to communicate strategically for a purpose and audience and use a variety of digital media, because I teach fully online. Now, after working with Laura and experiencing some resources from Teach Access, the folks who are funding us, Laura and I worked together to change that to what you see on the screen. And it looks like an easy fix, doesn't it? Students will be able to strategically and accessibly communicate for those reasons. And so that's the outcome. We look back now, what kind of evidence can I have my students create so that they achieve those outcomes? And I'm giving you two examples with our learning management system. One, in all of my courses, my students have to use the features already baked into the learning management system to communicate accessibly. So that, for example, would be the headings feature when you choose that to organize your message. Another is to use media such as images and video with accessibility in mind. And that means no surprises to the folks who are attending. I'm sure that they should include closed captions and add alt text to their videos. So now I'm going to go a bit more into depth about how I adjusted an entire aspect of a course with accessibility and inclusion in mind. So one of my graduate management courses is called Human Capital Development. And the learning outcome, actually, let me just stop and tell you that in this course, I have students once again from many different fields, including psychological counseling, instructional design, and publishing. So I have a wide variety of professions that those students are entering. So my original learning outcome is there for you to see at the top of the screen underneath Human Capital Development. And then after, sorry, let me just point out that learning outcome is standard across many, many courses. I'm sure it looks familiar to all of you. So you teach course content, and then an outcome is your students apply those concepts to solve a problem or to create something. So this is why we chose this as an example, because we all have that type of a learning outcome. Underneath, you can see that got expanded into two elements. The first one related to inclusion. So students are analyzing issues related to human capital development, but they're doing so from multiple and diverse perspectives. So we don't just look at accessibility, but we look at diversity on a broader scale. My students also will be able to explain and apply accessibility and inclusion as part of the processes that they're learning in my course, the processes related to human capital development. As an example of a process, I decided to focus on that for the evidence that I want my students to demonstrate as part of achieving these two outcomes. And that's in a project that I set up as a job design project, where they create or modify a job design or a job to integrate the course concepts as well as accessibility and inclusion. And the products are, thank you, Megan. The products that they are looking at, what they have to create in the evidence is a job description with specifications. And importantly, they also have a separate section of their assignment where they explain those decisions they made in terms of applying our course concepts as well as accessibility and inclusion. So now the third stage of backward design, I go back thinking, okay, how do I set my students up for success to create this evidence and achieve those two learning outcomes? And I've just included a couple of the activities, the learning experiences that they engage in. So they will select an example of what is out there in normal, typical daily life, and then they analyze it to see how many course concepts are already there, and also how many accessibility and inclusion concepts and principles are there. And you can imagine that there is really almost no accessibility or inclusion other than at the very end of a job description, it will say, in our organization, we comply with the accessibility, or sorry, ADA. I can't remember that right now because I'm a bit nervous. So the ADA compliance. And so we found a lot of gaps, which was great for my students to really notice how important this is. Again, thinking about activism for our students. And the second step was to look at the skills hiring toolkit. And I'm going to show you an example from Teach Access, because they already have a set of job descriptions that organizations can use, but they're mostly related to technology. They do have an expanding set, though, that are more related to, for example, the humanities and other fields. And then finally, they take the exemplar of a job description that does bake in those components, and they select and add those to their own job description. So Laura, if you could move to the next slide, I'll give you that example, folks, of the resource from Teach Access about an HR generalist position. And if you look at this second bullet point, and I'll stop talking for about 15 seconds, just for you to recognize those elements that we've been talking about related to accessibility and inclusion, and I'll stop now. Okay, so what I was really happy to see is that no matter what field my students were in, they're already thinking about their future workplace and how to design jobs where these are important roles and responsibilities, not just a tagline at the end, and then embed them into the workflow through the job description. And the last example I'll share with you, Laura, if you could go to the next one, is for all the fields that I work with in my current position. My students are going to be leaders in their workplaces, and that means that they'll be a part of interview processes. And you can see, again, Teach Access provides you with some elements to think about when you're in that recruitment phase. So if we move on to the next slide, Laura, I think it's over to you.
This is a resource we wanted to share with you all here today as another example of creating that awareness among students. So this is something that we can't show you today because of time. We wanted to, but time is limited. But we do think it's valuable in terms of opening up our understanding of engaging with people with varying abilities, and certainly something that you could share with your teams or your students. And that will be available for folks following the session. So we're going to be making the slides available. So to recap on what we've talked about here today, we encourage you to think about how these strategies enable you to be an activist in your work for accessibility. We've talked about the disability matrix, use of personas, embedding accessibility into the design thinking process, and then also thinking about this from a backwards design perspective. And we do think that is those are valuable tools that we've seen employed through our courses. It's also impacted how we're doing our work, right? Like, so even since the beginning of this project, Karen and I both have reflected several times how these lessons have helped us to apply through examples in our own daily work. And so that's why we wanted to pass them along to you. So at this point, we want to open it up to questions, see if there are any comments or thoughts around anything that we've talked about here today. Maybe, thinking back to our why, we went into this hoping that it would make an impact to those with disabilities and share these strategies with others to do that. And then kind of refined it into these four buckets at this point. But the sky's the limit. And we see this work ongoing as we're exploring additional instructional strategies as well as service design and so forth. So, yeah. Is there any questions, comments? I did get a chance after I was doing all the talking. So then I took a moment to take a look at all the great folks in the chat. Thank you very much for introducing yourself. So many great, schools represented here, which is awesome. And, instructors, instructional designers, professors, librarians. So we had the gamut, which was great as far as audience. And yeah. So it looks like there's a question. Dr. Cameron has a question. Is there anyone at SUNY that is focused on making the workplace inclusive for faculty? Interesting.
Yeah, this is one of the concepts that have emerged from Teach Access, and folks have asked that as part of the resources that Laura and I have been exploring. But I don't know of anyone, for example, but I do know there's a greater emphasis now, including funding for all of the accommodative services departments. At SUNY Potsdam, they've received funding to hire someone new to work with faculty, but still it's not about supporting faculty with needs. So I think that's a really important point. I don't know if anyone else in attendance can speak to that, but you raise a really important point.
Yeah, and I can just say that so in my work at Clarkson, some of these lessons, like you said, have really impacted how I do my work. And one of the things that I work on is classrooms and furniture and, setting up classrooms. And so kind of in line with this, what we've done so I had heard from faculty that, the space that they're using in the front of the classroom, specifically the podium, is a challenge at times, especially for shorter faculty or those that might need to have access because of a wheelchair. And so we actually have shifted our purchases. This has impacted our purchasing habits to purchasing podiums that now are adjustable. So we can, raise or lower the height of the podium. Actually, the instructor can do that. So anybody who's teaching in the front of the room has that capability to move that podium up and down. So I look at that as an example of one method for sort of making the learning environment a bit more inclusive for those that are working in it and learning in it. So that's just an example.
Would anybody like to share any of the strategies that you think you could, after leaving this session, try out in your own context? And what I'll point out with what Laura just gave us an example of, and please do unmute if you do have something to contribute, interrupt me, and I'd rather hear your voice. But Laura has just illustrated how design thinking and working with faculty, the faculty experiencing these challenges, that's the first stage of design thinking, which is empathy. And it's an iterative nonlinear process. So every step you take, whether it's define the problem, ideate, prototype, you're always going to be going back to that person at the center. And that's why that's embedded in all of my courses, no matter what the discipline. Every discipline solves problems, creates services, etc. And and it's applicable. So Casey says, after going through the UDL training, I've used the backward design process to redo all of my courses. That's phenomenal. That's excellent. And one thing I'll just add to that, Casey, is that now that may seem overwhelming to folks listening, whether it's your process or your course, but there's a +1 approach to UDL that I've heard about, where you just, your next step for next semester, just choose one strategy or one feature that you learn from the Universal Design for Learning, for example, and apply it. You can't change everything overnight, but choose one. Think of this +1 moving in that direction. Tina, did you have something?
Hi, thank you for your presentation. Very helpful. I actually applied for the Teach Access program, and I'm hoping I get in.
This round.
Was that
This round, you're hopeful for this coming round.
for this round? Yeah, so I want to
Awesome.
know if I didn't get in, can you reapply again for the next cycle?
I
I'm
believe
sure you
so.
can, yes. We don't really know.
Oh, okay. It's so important to me that, I really hope, because we have to teach, I teach in the nursing program at Stony Brook. So what I want to do is I want to teach the students to be able to provide, because nurses are educators, right? Well, that's one of our roles, that hopefully they can teach accessibly, so that's the whole application for me. I just hope that I get it.
Yeah, and Tina, I hope you do too. That is a great bonus, right? I will say they have a number of programs and resources available that even if you aren't a successful grant applicant, you can take advantage of. They have courses, they have also a repository of curriculum products that you can access. So I find myself going back to their website quite regularly for reference materials as well as guidance and additional resources. So just throwing that plug out there.
Yeah, that's great. Thank
Yeah.
you.
So some
So
great
Laura, maybe
comments in the chat. Yep.
if you could go to the next slide so folks have our contact details.
Oh, yes, of course. That would be helpful. Yes,
So we're
we welcome
developing
her.
a proof of concept related to course design, but Laura's always pushing me to think about, it's beyond course design. It's for students in their worlds that they're entering. And it's also for our colleagues like you who work in instructional design, the libraries, etc. So we're looking as much as possible to generalizable strategies for everybody in higher ed. That's just, small scale, of course. Great. Well, we hope to hear from you, and we'd be happy to share even our instructional materials and any other aspect of what we do. And we wish you all the best in trying out some of these strategies and engaging in more activism.
Great,
Yes.
thank you. I'm gonna just stop the recording.